Hi, my name is Lucia Cerci. I'm a developer advocate at Confluent, and let's get started with Apache Kafka. So, 34.16% of respondents to a StackOverflow survey said that they dreaded learning Apache Kafka. Now, I don't know about you, but whenever I have a feeling of dread, anxiety, or fear, I try to respond with a sense of curiosity in order to find out why exactly I am having that feeling. So, I thought about why people dread learning Apache Kafka and came up with two reasons. One is that it can be a new thought paradigm. So, much like when an API developer is asked to learn databases, there's kind of a lot to learn and new ways to think about solving problems when you start using Kafka. So, that can be a little bit intimidating. There's also a gorgeous depth and breadth of tools in the Apache Kafka ecosystem. And just like the wide variety of ocean life, that can be a little bit intimidating when you're first getting started learning about what to use. So, the point of this talk is to address those two reasons. What is Apache Kafka anyway? Apache Kafka is an open source distributed event streaming platform that aims to provide a high throughput, low latency solution for handling real time data feeds. So that's what we call a spiel, right? But we will break down those terms in the rest of the talk and then revisit this blurb, and we'll be able to understand more of what that means. I think it's good to discuss where Kafka is useful before we dive into it. So, really, for anything where you need to move a large amount of data in real time in an organized manner. So, event driven applications, data pipelines, mainframe conversion, and website clickstream analysis, which was the original use case when it was developed at LinkedIn. Today, we're going to start thinking about how you might track data from clicks on a website and put them into Kafka. So, first of all, if Kafka is event streaming, what is an event? An event, broadly speaking, is a thing that happens, right? It could be something like a party or something like stopping at a red light in your day. But within the context, maybe of application design, it could be something like a click, a request for a ride. For an Internet of Things application, it could be a change in thermostat temperature. And in Kafka, these kinds of events are represented by keys and values, and they're usually accompanied by a timestamp. Now, what if you want to track all of the different clicks on a page, on a toggle, a search bar, a start button? You could organize those into a logical grouping called a topic. Now, the underlying data structure of a topic is a log. And there's a couple of things to remember when we're reasoning about logs. One is that they're not queues. So as soon as an event is read from a log, then it does not disappear, it persists. The other two things are is that once a message or an event has been written to a log, you cannot delete it and you can't mutate it. Now, each topic is split into logs called partitions, and every one of these partitions can live on a different server. And this really gives Kafka its quality of being low latency and high throughput. Now, how do events get into those partitions? That's the role of a producer. A producer is responsible for assigning events to partitions by keys, and each producer can write to multiple topics. There's a couple pieces of configuration that are good to know when you are starting out with producers. And besides, being able to authenticate your producer, you're going to want to be able to understand the relationship between the batch size and the number of milliseconds the producer lingers, because the producer is also responsible for compressing data. So that means that if you want to increase the size of the batch of data that the producer compresses, you will also need to increase the number of milliseconds it lingers between setting off those batches, or else it won't have enough time to compress the size that you want, and vice versa. These two pieces of configuration are related to each other. So if a producer writes messages or events to a topic, what reads them? Well, that's the role of a consumer. A consumer can read from many topics, and it can be organized in groups. It's important to remember when you're first starting out with applications that if two consumers are one group, they cannot read from the same partition. So they can read from the same topic, but not from the same partitions within that topic. So in this example, consumer one is reading from partitions one and two. That means the second consumer can't read from partition one, but it can read from the third partition. And that's how the workload is balanced. Now, that means that a very important piece of configuration to know when you're starting out with consumers is the group ID, because that determines which consumers belong in the same group. Now, all of this happens in real time. So as soon as a producer sends an event to a topic, the consumer, which is subscribed to that topic, can read it. And this speed leads people to compare Kafka to a central nervous system. Because just like if the classic example, if you have your hand on a hot stove, the rest of your nervous system can coordinate the movement to move your arm away from that stove immediately in real time. So it's easy to disseminate these events across a whole system in real time. And so a lot of people like to compare Kafka to a central nervous system that way. So hopefully that gives you a start on the new thought paradigm and starts neutralizing that fear for you. Now, how do we navigate all of these Kafka tools and resources? There's a lot. There's Kafka Connect, Kafka Streams, there's KSQLDB. Those all have to do with either aggregating and analyzing the data in your topics or connecting sources and sinks. And then there's at least 4 different GUIs. There's at least 4 different CLI tools: Kafka shell scripts, KCAT, KC control, and the Confluent CLI. There's something called KIPs, which I like to read. They stands for Kafka Improvement Proposals, and you can see the direction where Kafka is going if you read those, because those are the proposals that the community has written in order to direct the development of Kafka. There's also, like most technological topics, a plethora of wonderful O'Reilly books on it. So how do you get started? How do you solve your problems when you are just starting out in the world of Kafka? I want to take a moment to talk about the power of community. So back in 2020, I was learning how to code, and I don't think 2020 was an easy year for anybody. It certainly wasn't for me. I was recovering from a traumatic personal loss. I had some gnarly health issues, and I was juggling childcare between me and my husband. And all of that stress combined meant that I really couldn't debug my way out of a paper bag. And I turned to a community called Virtual Coffee. And that community had some senior engineers in it who were willing to help me pair and help me develop my coding skills. And, I think about them every day when I log on to GitHub and start coding. And it taught me a lesson more than gratitude, right? It taught me that whenever I am learning to use a new tool, then I will turn to community and ask someone with more experience than me, how did you solve this problem that I have? What are my options? What are the pros and cons, right? So I'd like to offer some community options for you. There's Kafka Summit London happening in May. I'll be there. Hope to see you there in person. You can also check for your local Kafka meetup. If you Google like Kafka meetup near me, that should show up. And then there will be Current 2023, which is another US-based Kafka conference happening in September. And then online, there's the Confluent community Slack. You'll see me poking around there. There's a very lively Reddit thread and Apache Kafka. You can come to those 2 places with questions ranging from basic concepts to details about configuration. For tech in general, I can recommend Virtual Coffee, also certified freshevents.dev. And then, of course, there's PlatformCon. I encourage you to get to know each other in the comments and ask questions. I'd be happy to interact with you in the chat. So hopefully that neutralizes the second reason to be intimidated by Apache Kafka for you. Let's revisit that blurb. So Apache Kafka is an open source, distributed event streaming platform, so we discussed events, that aims to provide a high throughput, low latency solution, thank you, Partitions, for handling real time data feeds. So we know that everything that is processed in Kafka happens in real time. I'd like to present myself as your first contact within the Kafka community. You can contact me at any of these places here or visit my website to see what I've been writing recently. There's some Kafka resources on there as well. Thank you.